Quick note before the video begins, the category names have changed considerably over time, but for the sake of convenience and general understanding, I'll be referring to the game's main speedrun category as any% through the course of this video. On August 6, 2016, the Hobbit speedrunner Schneider completed the first documented speedrun of the game using no long jumps. This category was obviously called any% no long jumps, and it featured one unique skip that other categories didn't use at the time. In the stage An Unexpected Party, Schneider used a clip near the start of the level to get out of bounds, then navigated all the way to the Green Dragon Inn without having to complete any of the quests. This run was the first public display of this route, and although it didn't save time over the any% route, it was used in this category because the normal any% route uses a long jump combined with a jump attack to skip over the bridge, a strat that no long jumps obviously can't exploit due to not being allowed to use long jumps. The rest of the route for this category was fairly straightforward, only being slower than the any% route due to not being able to optimize movement as much, since long jumps weren't allowed. Schneider's final time for this run was 33 minutes and 42 seconds, not much slower than his any% record of 30:33, which should be set about 2 weeks later. However, this video isn't actually about no long jumps, because in 2021 there was another category that seemingly popped up out of the blue that attracted considerably more attention. Like no long jumps, this category limited your moveset by banning one of Bilbo's basic techniques, but unlike NLJ, this additional limit changed the routing in a much more complicated way, as it banned a technique that many skips heavily relied on. This is the history of the category known as NJA, no jump attacks. This story starts with a lesser-known runner, King 174 Russ. King is a Russian speedrunner who, alongside participating in the button challenge communities, primarily focuses on running lesser-known categories on PC. In February of 2021, King took a look at the category extensions leaderboard and noticed a category that had been added, no jump attacks. Observing that there were no actual runs on the leaderboard, he decided to route the category himself and complete the first speedrun. In Dreamworld, King fought the goblins, doing his best to not use his jump attack. This fight can be quite annoying, as goblins can strategically shield your attacks, a maneuver which can normally only be countered by using a jump attack with your sword. In the next level, An Unexpected Party, he followed the intended path, grabbing the hammer and nails to fix the bridge. Roast Mountain was identical to the any% route, since this clip didn't require any jump attacks, simply clip through the wall at the start to reach a leftover end trigger. Troll Hole, however, was another story. Because the boost used in any% required a jump attack to get out of bounds, and there were no other ways out of bounds at the beginning of the level without using a similar boost, King had to play the first half of the level normally, navigating the caves until he was high enough up to use an alternate out of bounds he'd found. This involved walking on an invisible wall, then dropping off behind the normal bounds of the level and walking to the end trigger. This route took about 2.5 minutes, as opposed to the less than 20 seconds the any% route took. Overhill and Underhill was played almost identical to the any% route, with a few slight movement variations to avoid using jump attacks, as well as a goblin fight skip that involved performing a long jump at a tight angle up a sloped wall. Riddles in the Dark was a similar case. All he had to do was clip through a wall using a ledge grab, then climb a few ledges, ride a minecart, and end a level. Flies and Spiders used an older version of the route, since the updated method that had been found by MDPie and confirmed faster by MKarma seemingly required a jump attack boost onto a rock. Barrels Out of Bond, like Troll Hole, couldn't be completed like any%, and instead used a considerably older route involving a gate clip into the basement about halfway through the level. This level took about 5 minutes, as opposed to nearly 10 seconds it took in any%. King's route for a warm welcome was similar to the any% route, but with a slight variation. Because the jump to the invisible floor was so precise without a jump attack, King had found an alternate way to get there. By jumping onto the wooden gate surrounding the warehouse, he was able to jump through a wall with no collision, and land on the invisible floor on the other side, which extended far enough inwards for him to walk to where he needed to drop down. From there, he dropped into the water and drifted to the end trigger. This trick unfortunately took him a few attempts. In Inside Information, King once again used an older version of the end trigger route, which involved climbing nearly to the top of the level in order to jump above an invisible wall and fall into the end trigger. The next stage, The Gathering of the Clouds, used the any% route, which used 2 simple wall clips to reach the end of the level early. He unfortunately was killed by a spider and had to perform the first half of the level again. In The Clouds Burst, he fought the goblins near the dwarves, then used a difficult out-of-bounds setup to skip to the Corwin rescue mission, which he skipped by loading it and using a clip warp. a trick which involves setting a safe position by staying on the ground for at least a full second, holding that position by not being on the ground for a full second again, then performing any of various glitches to warp back to that position. Unfortunately, near the end of the level, King missed a jump to a ladder and died, reloading at a save he'd made shortly before the out of bounds. After a few more unsuccessful attempts, he managed to get out of bounds again, and continued on with few mistakes, until he missed a rock throw a few too many times and had to navigate along the intended path for a short while. Finally, King 174 Russ finished his run, achieving a time of 39 minutes and 23 seconds without loads. The run certainly wasn't perfect, but it was a good showcase of the routes King had come up with, and it would sit on the leaderboard for the next several months. It didn't really seem like anyone else was interested in running this niche category, especially since most of the community's attention during this time was on the exciting Any% rivalry between M Karma and Shockster. However, the next advancement of the NJA speedrun would come in July, and I think it's safe to say that no one was expecting this. This skip was wild. This meant that Trollhole could be completed in mere seconds in NJA, since this was exactly where the end trigger used in Any% was located. Even if this strat was a bit inconsistent, Trollhole was early enough in the run that it wouldn't be a huge pain to reset here. I immediately began playing around with this, knowing that it could be a considerable time save for NJA. But to my surprise, I wasn't the only runner interested in this category. So there's this one Hobbit speedrunner who, unless you follow speedruns of the game closely, you've probably never heard of. His name is Seborygon. Seb is a runner who doesn't really participate much in the community Discord. He mainly just watches from the wings, learns whatever categories he's interested in, and silently drops runs. And in late 2021, he had decided he was interested in NJA. So he silently learned the route, optimizing strats or finding new ones altogether. And on December 18, he dropped a new record. Let's take a look. In Dreamworld, he used a long-known strategy that involved getting out of bounds early in the level by climbing a tree, then navigating out of bounds around the goblin fight. Like King 174 Russ, he completed an unexpected party using the intended route, then used the Any% route in Roast Mutton, and the new log clip in Trollhole, exiting the stage nearly 3 minutes ahead of King. Even though his route through Overhill and Underhill was nearly identical to King's, he lost time from a death in the first half, as well as by not using the precise goblin fight skip King had used. In Riddles in the Dark, he saved a few more seconds over King by implementing the relatively new glitch cart skip, which involves navigating to an invisible minecart, then using pre-calculated slash strats to ride the cart while avoiding collisions from the other decorative minecarts. His execution of Flies and Spiders was also quite solid, with only a mistake at the end of the level costing him a few seconds. He exited the level more than 3 minutes ahead of the record. Here, a very interesting twist. Because Seb hadn't yet watched King's run, he hadn't caught on to the cellar clip yet. So in Barrels Out of Bond, he proceeded to use a completely different, albeit unique, route to skip most of the basement. This route ended up costing him a good amount of time, putting him about 1 minute and 40 seconds ahead of King once again. However, it was his late game that would truly put Seborygon ahead. In a warm welcome, he saved quite a bit of time over King's run by performing the precise long jump to the invisible floor from the dock, then got the slow fall drift on his first try. Now about 4.5 minutes ahead, he entered inside information, and pulled off the skip with a considerably faster setup. He now had nearly a 6-minute lead on the record going into the final 2 levels, where he could easily save a lot more time. Seb's execution of the Gathering of the Clouds was solid, enough to save a bit more time over King. Then in the Cloudsburst, he decided to go for the jump attackless version of the Goblin Fight skip, which requires a tight slash jump off some leaning boards. This was a fairly tricky maneuver to pull off, but even on the 3rd try, he managed to save a huge amount of time. Everything else in the level went incredibly smoothly, and Seborygon finished his run with a time of 25 minutes and 46 seconds without loads, absolutely smashing the previous world record. This run definitely still had a few mistakes, as well as spots for obvious time saves, but for a few weeks, Seb seemed happy with this run. Until January, when he watched some other runs, improved his routes, and came back with another record. This new run was certainly an improvement. As early as an unexpected party, Seb was already introducing improvements, such as using the bridge skip discussed at the start of this video. His gameplay was also generally better. He managed to avoid his death in Overhill and Underhill, and exited the level about a minute ahead of his previous run. He'd even managed to find a way to perform the faster flies and spiders route by jumping onto a specific polygon on the right side of the rock that doesn't make you slide off. He still hadn't learned the cellar clip, using his slower basement skip instead. He also used King's slower version of the out of bounds and a warm welcome, since it was much easier and more consistent to pull off. Almost exactly 2 minutes ahead of his own run, he entered inside information. He lost some time to falling down during his platforming, but still managed to pull off the trigger jump first try. His gathering of the clouds was also well executed. Once again, he was entering the final level, but only about a minute and a half ahead of his record. Once again, he got the goblin fight skip on the third try. He performed most of the rest of the level cleanly, only struggling a bit with the ending out of bounds trick. He closed the run out with a 24-21 without loads, another solid record, though not as quite as solid of an endgame as his previous. With this run out of the way, Seb seemingly decided to step away from the category, leaving it for other runners to pick up. I mentioned earlier that around the time M. Karma found the new Troll Hole skip, I had begun looking into the NJA category myself. In February, after seeing Seborygon's runs, I decided to give the run a go. Unlike Seb, I wasn't confident in some of the newer tricks like Riddles in the Dark Glitch Cart, and I also didn't feel like learning the polygon precise flies and spiders route. I went into the run knowing that I had a slight disadvantage in these levels. Starting off the run, I had solid execution of the first 4 stages. Exiting Troll Hole, I was already about 10 seconds ahead of Seb. I failed the Bean Island jump and Overhill twice, but even with that lost time, still managed to gain another 9 seconds over Seb due to my general movement being a bit better. I did lose about 6 seconds in Riddles in the Dark due to not using the glitch cart, but I was expecting that. In Flies and Spiders, even though the route I used was considerably slower, I still managed to save 7 more seconds through more optimized movement and less setup time. Going into Barrels, I knew that I had a huge advantage. I knew the cellar clip route, and I was confident in my ability to pull it off. My execution of this trick, as well as the level in general, was pretty solid, and I ended the level a full minute and a half ahead of the record. I lost a few seconds in a warm welcome by falling into the water, but managed to not lose too much time due to using the faster out of bounds jump. Unfortunately, I lost nearly a full minute in inside information due to not preparing enough for the end trigger jump. My gathering of the clouds execution was about on par, and I entered the clouds burst with only about a 30-second lead. My goblin fight skip took me 4 attempts, but my recovery time was a bit faster than Seb's. The rest of the level went quite smoothly, until near the end of the level when I began thinking, wait a minute, this is a sub 24. Maybe. There's no way. Dude, that was so bad though. In just a few attempts, I managed to save almost 40 seconds from the previous record. The new record was 23 minutes and 43 seconds. Definitely a respectable time. Once again, it wasn't a perfect run, but it was definitely a solid improvement. Only a day after my new record, another fairly new runner had decided to learn this mostly untouched category. This runner's name was El Nuchador. Nooch, myself, and another interested runner named Kyroscope spent a good amount of time over the next week in Discord calls working on the category, testing theories and setups, things like that. In Flies and Spiders, we found a new route that was still slower than Seb's polygon precise jump, but faster than what I had used in my own run. It involved falling down and hitting a load trigger from outside of a tunnel in order to load in the next section of the level, then navigating there with a few easy jumps. We also tested various methods of making the cellar clip and barrels more consistent, and eventually landed on saving and reloading in the room, which seemed to make the clip much easier. And in the Clouds Burst, we found a way to get out of bounds near the end of the level, which would save a few seconds. There were also a few other runners who stepped in to help. Moose and Shockster joined a few calls and found setups for the Overhill Goblin Skip and the Troll Hole Log Skip, respectively. On February 18, Nooch started a new run. His start wasn't quite as strong as mine, and he exited Troll Hole about 37 seconds behind my run. He managed to save some time in Overhill by not messing up Bean Island, and kept following me about 20 seconds behind, all the way to Inside Information. Here, he had the chance to save a good amount of time by not missing the end trigger jump. He got the jump first try, instantly pulling 16 seconds ahead of me. He matched my execution and gathering, Then in the Cloud's Burst, he managed to get the Goblin fight skip in just 2 tries. The rest of the level went cleanly, with Nooch even using the new out of bounds at the end of the stage to save a few more seconds. The final time of the run was 23 minutes and 22 seconds, a new world record, solidly 21 seconds ahead of me, and with far fewer mistakes. Watching Nooch run was fun, and I was glad to see him get a world record, but seeing him learn and improve this quickly only made me more motivated, and so I continued grinding.
Speedrunning in your car heading to Vancouver?
Yes, correct. I'm driving while playing the Hobbit. And also trying to get the NJA record.
Meaning to crash percent.
That's good. "21 minutes and 28 seconds, a new world record by nearly 2 minutes. Definitely a much more optimized run than anything that came before. The run still obviously wasn't perfect, but the rivalry between myself and Nooch had been fun to engage in. But wait a minute, what was that thing that Nooch said during the run?
Can't be more than 2 minutes slower than any percent.
Let me ask the question this way. What do you think a shocky time would be for this category?
I don't think that no jump attacks is any more than 6 minutes slower than any percent. So, yeah, I think he could get sub 18.
Oh yeah. Imagine if Shockster ever ran this category. That record would probably be insane. Within just a few hours, Shocky had picked up the run and dropped the record to 19 minutes and 17 seconds. This run had nearly everything: impeccable execution, fast setups for strats, excellent movement, up-to-date fastest strategies. The only significant mistakes were a few missed jumps in Cloud's Burst, and the only suboptimal route was Riddles in the Dark, where he didn't use the glitch cart. But don't worry, he can fix that in the next run. On the same day, he managed to lower the record to 18 minutes and 21 seconds. The only significant time loss in this run was a missed long jump for the fight skip in Overhill and Underhill. Everything else was flawless.